Hello, welcome back to the Life on the Wrist podcast. Pocket watches are something that I've discussed actually at length on Life on the Wrist. I do find pocket watches to be an interesting part of watch collecting. There are a lot of really incredible innovations that took place with pocket watches, being that they were sort of the first timekeeper that a lot of very important watchmakers started off with. Only within the last 100 years have we seen watches kind of make their way onto people's wrists. And so pocket watches are really the way for people to tell time. I've done a couple of articles on Life on the Wrist about pocket watches, and I thought today I would actually give a brief overview of some of the biggest articles that I've done, articles and videos that I've done about pocket watches over the last couple of years. All of that is kind of in preparation for one of the pocket watch that I wanted to talk about, which is a really incredible Patek Philippe pocket watch that I got from the 1920s. I've sort of added to the collection. So I'll also sort of touch on some other individuals and sort of where I think pocket watches are going to end up going. There'll be links in the show notes to all of the things that I discuss, or all the articles that I discuss during this podcast, so be sure to head over to the show notes so you can follow along as we sort of go through this. So back in 2019, actually towards the end of 2019, I created a video and wrote an article about whether or not I thought pocket watches were going to have a comeback. This was all sort of stemmed from Hodinkij's 10th anniversary celebration, H10, where they had a panel titled The Italian Influence with John Goldberger and Davide Parmigiani. Obviously, they were talking about how Italy was really the mecca when it came to collecting watches, and how it has had a huge influence on collecting today. But towards the end of the panel, John Goldberger, very nonchalantly as he always does, pulled out this minute-repeating pocket watch to show the audience what he considered to be value in vintage watches, and Davide Parmigiani chimed in nicely, adding that he had many and that people should really consider buying pocket watches as they kind of are undervalued. Now, in this video and article, I sort of look at it from three dimensions: a horological appeal, an aesthetic appeal, and a functionality. And I sort of discuss whether or not I think pocket watches would really make a comeback. I think from a horological and aesthetic appeal, there are some incredibly beautiful pocket watches out there that really hit on a lot of the aesthetics that many watch collectors look for when they're looking for timekeeping devices to add to a collection or to use on a day-to-day basis. The problem is the functionality of pocket watches. It's not really as easy to wear or store on one's person as a wristwatch really is. It's much easier to strap something on the wrist and have something in a pocket. I don't think the average person kind of keeps their phone in one pocket and a wallet in the other, and so you really don't have a lot of room for a pocket watch. Furthermore, time can be told on a phone, so really it's hard to say if pocket watches would really make a comeback. Now, there are people who maybe keep a wallet in a jacket pocket, so that does open up a pocket for someone. But back then, I found it kind of hard to make the argument that pocket watches would really make a comeback. This has progressed quite interesting over the last, let's call it 3 years, because that article and video was written back in the end of 2019, so just before 2020 started. I really was in the mindset that I think they're incredible collector's items, but the use of pocket watches would be quite difficult. I think the landscape has actually changed. I think individuals have sort of become a little bit more open to adding pocket watches to their collections because of the immense value that they have when it comes to a collection. A lot of the times you can find minute-repeating pocket watches from brands like Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, Cartier, that have incredible aesthetics, incredible appeal, and when compared to a wristwatch, at a fairly at a lower price point, or a little bit more accessible to the average collector than some of those minute repeater wristwatches that I'm speaking of. And so I actually think Davide Parmigiani and John Gober, Auro Montanari, have sort of garnered some interest in the watch collecting community about pocket watches, and more people I think are turning to them. I think that's really evident by looking at some of the vintage watch dealers. One of them that I wanted to speak about is Collectability. If you don't know Collectability, it's John Reardon is a really knowledgeable Patek Philippe expert, and he sells mainly Patek Philippe timepieces, everything from clocks to wristwatches to pocket watches. And some of the watches that he sources for collectors or offers on his website are pocket watches from Patek Philippe, and they are some of the highest quality, obviously, made by Patek Philippe, but I'm seeing more and more a larger interest in people on the posts and videos that he posts on the Collectability YouTube channel and on his website, on Instagram as well. And I think that's really a positive sign that more and more people are getting into it. And I think that might demonstrate this sort of turning point where people are being a little bit more accepting of pocket watches. Big shout out to Collectability. If you follow this podcast, I highly recommend that you check out the Collectability podcast. There are some incredible episodes that John Reardon has done with some incredible guests. So I highly recommend you following the Collectability podcast if you don't already. You should also check out their website because there are some absolutely incredible Patek Philippe pieces on their website. I recently saw a video about Patek Philippe coin watches, so check that out if you haven't seen that. It's quite interesting to then look at where pocket watches have popped up on my on Life on the Wrist. This time last year, almost to the day, I made an article about a Christie's auction that happened. It was the Geneva Edit, an important private collection, where they hosted an important private collector's collection to be sold, and that it was sold in December 2021. It featured an attractive range of pocket watches and clocks dating from the 18th century to the present day, all coming from an important European collection. There were incredible pieces from famous manufacturers like Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, Breguet, and Henry Capt, among others. And the prices that these watches sold for felt like absolute steals when you really zoomed in and looked at some of the pieces that they sold. Many of the pieces that I featured in this article and on the video were pocket watches. As an example, I featured a Patek Philippe silver mono-pusher chronograph open-face pocket watch from Patek Philippe that sold for $23,750, which was above estimates. But to me, to get a mono-pusher chronograph for $23,000 is a fairly attractive price for individuals who are looking for these incredible watches. And it's a great example of how pocket watches might seem sort of undervalued. Clearly, the collector who amassed this collection saw the benefit of these watches. Another example was a Vacheron Constantin white gold open-face pocket watch with Breguet numbers, which was incredible from the 1920s. White gold case that sold for $3,250, an absolute steal when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. I think most time-only pocket watches sell for about $5,000 nowadays, so I think is a very interesting result with that one. There was also a very, very attractive Patek Philippe in platinum with yellow gold and mother of pearl open face pocket. It was a pocket watch with yellow gold and mother of pearl on the dial of the piece, and again, super attractive. Sold for $15,000, which was above estimates, estimated between $1,500 and $2,500. So more than maybe what was estimated, but still a very good price. for something from 1920. And so, you go from the end of 2019, where I kind of discussed how, if pocket watches would make a comeback, to this really cool collection that sold at Christie's. And then what I actually covered was a very cool pocket watch that was manufactured by Elgin, which was actually a watch that kind of started watch collecting for me, because it belonged to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, who was gifted the pocket watch upon his graduation from high school, and that sort of started a tradition for me, for my family, where when you graduated from high school, you received some sort of timekeeping device. I was lucky enough to be featured on one of Hodinki's episodes of Watch Stories, where I talked about this sort of tradition, and so I'll leave a link in the show notes to that as well if you want to take a look at it. The pocket watch is really simple. It's time only, sub-seconds dial, but really beautiful finishing on the dial of the watch. So be sure to check out the video if you wanna see that pocket watch. But that sort of it's all sort of culminated in this pocket watch that I've recently been able to take a look at, which is from Patek Philippe. So I purchased this watch from a dealer based in California, and the watch is a time-only Patek Philippe from the late 1920s, I believe 1926, 1927, something around there. And it is a fairly simple yellow gold pocket watch with a white dial, a sub-dial. It has this sub-seconds at 6 o'clock with applied Breguet numbers and sort of these dots around the outside of the watch that look very similar to the Vacheron Constant that I mentioned was part of the Christie's auction. Look, the dial looks very, very similar, sub-seconds almost to the T. But what was really cool about this pocket watch is it actually comes with these really beautiful leaf hands, which is something that I really, really love. I love, one thing I love Breguet numbers, and then the second thing is I love leaf hands. And so I don't unfortunately have photos that I can show you, that I can put in the show notes for this. You'll have to stay tuned for me to make a video about this pocket watch, but it's in incredible condition. The dial is immaculate, signed Patek Philippe. If there is a engraving on the back of the watch, but it's really, really a simple pocket watch in yellow gold. The case is in overall very good condition. You can even still see the hallmark, which is on the stem, the crown stem, which is really cool. The watch has a 17-line movement that is in really great condition, considering that it's almost 100 years old. And I think this is a perfect representation of what I believe to be some incredible value in collecting watches, and also maybe the trajectory of where things might end up going in watch collecting. I do think that pocket watches are going to gain popularity even more, and I think this is a wonderful example of that. I'm going to wind it to see if you can hear sort of how it's wound. Hopefully you can, because it does sound really beautiful. If only it was a minute repeater and I could have you listen to the sound that it makes. But I hope that at least gives you an idea of what it sounds like when you wind the watch. I really do think that pocket watches are making some sort of comeback. Collectors are paying a little bit more attention to them. I don't know if it stems from the Italian influence panel discussion for that took place at Hodink's H10, but I do think that people are paying more attention to them, as they should be, because brands like Patek Philippe and Elgin and Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constant did make some incredible pocket watches throughout their history, and I think there's so much more to be explored for the average collector when it comes to educating themselves and enjoying what watchmakers were able to create through pocket watches. As I mentioned, I'll leave links in the show notes to all of the things that I've discussed today. So be sure to see the show notes if you want to take a look at some of the articles, videos, and pictures of the watches that I mentioned during this podcast. If you are new to Live from the Wrist, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. We'd love to have you, and share this with a friend who might be interested in listening to a watch podcast. Let me know what you think about pocket watches. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send us a message on our website or on our Instagram, really anywhere, and we'll love to have a conversation with you about where pocket watches are going to go in the future. If you are feeling generous and wouldn't mind rating this podcast, really does help me out. Give me some feedback about what we can do on this podcast, and if there's anything you'd like for us to change. With this said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and until next time.